Wake from your sleep, the drying of your tears. Today we escape, we escape. Pack and get dressed before your father hears us before.
Well, I think there's several reasons, but I think probably the most that I see is, first of all, the self-esteem of the woman has really taken to a low point where she blames herself, that she's embarrassed, she's afraid to tell family members, might be afraid to tell the father for fear of what the father would do, might be afraid to tell the school counselor because other kids in the school will find out what's going on. But more importantly, is afraid of what the abuser will do if she does report it.
It's like, what are people going to say? You know, they're going to think bad things about both of us, or maybe I'm afraid that if I leave that situation, something's going to happen. And a lot of times women in these kind of relationships, no matter what age they are, whether teenager into elderly, they're made to feel like you can't be successful on your own, you can't do it alone, you'll never have anybody better than me, nobody's going to want you, you're damaged goods. And that gets stuck in our head that, wow, I guess it's better to be in a bad relationship than not one at all. And that's the sad reality where so many of us end up, is we think it's better to be mistreated by someone versus being single.
I think most crimes go unreported is because there is such a stigma attached to both domestic violence and sexual assault. Unfortunately, there's a lot of rape culture out there, specifically with sexual assaults, that victims feel that they're the ones to blame. So they're embarrassed, they feel shame, they feel guilty, they think somehow they're at fault. And particularly in domestic violence situations, you have individuals that love that person, that live in what we call the F words, the fantasy. They think that this person will turn back into the person that they fell in love with. They don't want to report because they don't want that person to go to jail, because they might be the person that's financing everything. Their faith may tell them they have to stay. Their family, friends feel a failure. All of those reasons are some of the biggest that we see. The biggest I see by far in both crimes is fear. Is just that fear of reporting, that fear of coming forward, that fear of what this individual could do to them in retaliation, particularly in domestic violence cases. Both sexual assault and domestic, just straight physical assaults, that's a huge issue, because by the time a report comes across my desk, statistically in domestic violence, that's probably happened at least over 7 times before they've even had the courage to come forward. But 60% of the crimes go unreported, and absolutely one of the biggest is the stigma that these individuals face. It's always, why didn't they leave? Why didn't they report? What did they do? What did they do wrong? They've done nothing wrong, unfortunately, but society tells them differently.
A lot of it's because maybe at some point they've had consensual sex, and it makes it I think it makes it a bigger challenge for people, like, to think that they're going to be believed. Well, you know, we've been dating for so long and have had sex before, so why would somebody believe that this time they actually raped me and that I didn't want to? That makes it very difficult for the victim to come forward and be believed. And I've seen, you know, horrible examples of that just within my own friends. But more of, I think a lot of the judging comes internal. We're our own worst critics, and we're judging ourselves based on the situation. And the coulda, woulda, shouldas. It's hard to get past that. It really is. And to look at whatever it was I was doing, rape is not a consequence of that. But a lot of times women feel like this rape was a consequence of something I was doing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They don't look at it as, this was a crime perpetrated on me. No matter if it's someone I'm in a relationship with or had been, or a complete random person or friend. We're not looking at it as a crime.
I think that it's just kind of the way that our society is set up, that when you are a woman and you have something that tragic and terrible happen to you, it's almost like it's taboo to be a victim, because every time they tell people, they always place the fault on the women. Like, why did you decide to stay with that man who was going to hurt you? Why were you at that place when you knew it was harmful? Why did you go out walking at 7:30 at night? Because that's such a terrible thing to do. And so I think that so many women are so afraid that almost reporting it is going to have worse implications than just letting it go unnoticed. So if they tell someone, they're going to be hurt even more than they already are, and no one is really going to believe them, because so many people say that, like, they're just making this up to kind of get revenge on the person who is hurting them.
Oh, television. I love television, and I love social media. And I believe everything I see on the internet. No, but there are a lot of people that do, and we take what we see in the movies, and especially on certain television shows, as this is how every rape case goes. This is how every rape victim acts. This is what she wears, what she does. Oh, she was doing something wrong. We're very quick to judge in this society, and because of that, it makes it so difficult for people to speak up and to talk about what really happened. And you can pick any news story that we've seen in the past, I don't know, 2 weeks even. And how many times has someone looked at that article and said, what was she doing? What was she wearing? What did she do to provoke it? Mm-hmm. And, you know, a lot of that comes from our influence from the media, from our friends, what we learn or don't learn in school. I mean, we're constantly inundated with messages that are so inaccurate. Mm-hmm. That plays a huge role.
It's unfortunate you see that the cases that tend to make the media are these high profile cases where it's that person that no one can believe could commit these crimes. One of the biggest tends to be in the sports industry, that we think that these individuals are heroes and they're above the law and they're above anything like that, and you can see immediately the media actually is one of the biggest perpetrators of it, that they will portray the victim as something the victim must have done wrong, the victim must have been asking for it, the victim was making it up. Fortunately, a lot of times in those types of cases you get that, because immediately people think somebody's doing it for money. Like the Bill Cosby issue is one of the best examples of that, where everybody's like, well, they're suing him civilly, they must just want money, and it's not about that. So the media continues to perpetuate that. In the Steubenville, Ohio case, they focused on how these perpetrators who raped this girl filmed it, put it on YouTube, how they were the ones whose lives were ruined. Oh, look at them, look at their families, reaction to their families, and nobody focused on the victim. So it's unfortunate that what the media portrays is what people believe, and they believe that somehow victims are lying, somehow victims are at fault, particularly when there's alcohol involved, or it's domestic. They should have known better. Ray Rice issue, well, she was in his face first. I mean, it's just, they just continue to perpetuate that rape culture, and it's not just media, it's unfortunately in songs, videos, video games, things like that, that just always show this role that we're all supposed to play in society. Women are supposed to be weak and men are supposed to be strong, and if you get a strong woman or somebody who actually has a voice, then there must be something wrong with that person.
Mm-hmm. I think a great way is to get educated. What does domestic violence and dating violence look like? What does rape look like? What does sexual assault, what does this mean? Not only the, the statistics and all that, but what's the impact it has on the victims, and just using that information and sharing it. I use my social media as a great way to try to educate people. They don't have to agree or disagree, but hopefully they'll read the articles that I share. But it's about educating people about the impact that it has, because the impact goes so beyond the initial trauma, the initial victimization. And it's just helping people understand the true impact that it has on lives. To me, consent is two people that openly are communicating, which means it's two-way communication, not just one person thing. But they're both on the same level in terms of we're not under the influence of anything. There's no power and control imbalance. We both agree that this is something that we want to do. We've discussed even ahead of time what we will not do, like sexually, or what we're okay with. So we're very open with that. And then we can commence. But to me, consent happens long before the actual act of intercourse or, oral, anal, vaginal penetration ever happens. To me, consent means I'm in a relationship with someone or talking with someone. I've talked about my own sexuality, my own desires, what I don't like, what I do like. They've talked about that. We know each other's sexual history, things like that. We've talked about STI prevention and pregnancy prevention, all of those kind of things. To me, that would be the ultimate consent.
Mm-hmm. I would say the best way to look at consent when I speak and try to explain it is it's two individuals who are knowingly going into a situation where both parties agree, both parties are comfortable, and they both understand that no means no and it can be stopped at any time. So one person intoxicated, another person not, that's not consent. Or, you would if you love me, that's not consent. It's actually two parties who are going in fully aware of what's going on, completely understanding what's going to happen, and both okay with it, and actually okay. Not just the, okay, maybe I should do this because he took me out and paid for dinner or anything like that. That's coercion. That's not consent. That's forcing somebody to do something against their will, even if it is mental abuse. So I think that's the best way I could describe it. It's just two people who 100% are aware, knowing, and actually want this to happen.
I define consent as a willing, enthusiastic yes between both parties on the action that they're going to take. I think consent is really important in any kind of activity that you want to do with someone, but especially in a sexual context or in a context of rape, it needs to be seen as this is bodily a consent. Her or their body language is enthusiastic and willing to participate. Their voice is a consent. They are saying, yes, I want to do this. Yes, this feels good. Yes, I want to be doing this with you. And I think it's something that there's no vague line between it. Like, if you don't know whether this person is giving consent or not, it's not consent. You need an enthusiastic participation on both parties to be able to say, this is a consensual situation and this is something that we can proceed with.
Normally when these relationships begin, they start in the surroundings of where you would really not think you're going to meet a man that's abusive, for example. That might be a social scene where, quote, professional men hang out or whatever, and next thing they know, they're in a relationship with a man, and it doesn't matter what background the abusers come from. We have found that there have been police officers, attorneys, doctors, doesn't matter, that are abusive. So it doesn't matter how much money you make, that's going to define whether you're an abuser or not. And I think that's important to realize as well.
In domestic violence, we've kind of jokingly called them gingerbread cookie cutter individuals because they seem to have the same pattern. And usually what you do is you have somebody that has certain warning signs. Unfortunately, most people aren't trained to look for the warning signs, or even if they do, they just don't notice them because this is somebody that they care about, it's somebody that they're falling in love with. In domestic violence, you'll get people, individuals who want power and control. That's all these crimes are about. And they're manipulators, they're master manipulators at it. So what you tend to see is that moving away from friends and family, that distancing, so the perpetrator gets that victim to believe that they're the only ones in their lives, they're the only one that cares about them, that they shouldn't associate with family, they shouldn't associate with friends, because they don't want that victim getting good information from those individuals. A lot of times they will very much do that. They will start to pick on them, or maybe low self-esteem, play the stare down game, the just kidding game. It's like the start of actual mental abuse. I've never really seen a physical assault that has become physical that did not have some sort of pattern of mental abuse first. And it's usually that. It's getting that victim in a corner almost, where the victim thinks that she can't get out or he can't get out, that the only way is to be with this person. And it really is a psychological game.
Most always, if not always, they will tell you that they grew up in that type of an environment. That's all they knew, and they thought that's just the way you treat a woman. Likewise, we have found women that have told us they saw mom being treated that way by their dad, they saw their grandfather treat their grandmother in that manner, and they just thought that's the way all men were.
But in high school, I hated myself. I was very down on myself, very insecure, and every relationship that I had, I was very needy, and I needed their attention. And if they didn't call me, and this was before cell phones, if I didn't get a note passed to me in class, or if I didn't have that person's attention on me at all the time, I felt like they must not want to be with me, and I'm not a good enough person. And so that was the message I was really sending myself all through high school, college. And that's that crazy conundrum, is if we don't respect us, how can we expect others to? And it seems like these kind of personalities just glom on to that. And they can take an insecurity, maybe an insecurity about weight or about my hair or something like that, and take that and start to compliment you on that. And then you start to feel like, oh wow, you really think I'm beautiful? Oh wow, you want to go on a date with me? Oh, you want to buy me flowers? You want to call me all the time? You want to do these things? And it becomes very flattering, and we get hooked. And it's almost like a high. And before we know it, they start to change us.
They convince the woman that the reason they're being verbally put down or physically abused is because it's the woman's fault. It's something she did or said. It might be the way she wears her hair that he doesn't like, but he convinces her that's her fault, and that's the reason he's putting her down verbally or physically abusing her. Came home from work, dinner was late getting on the table. He's the man of the house. That shouldn't be that way, and because he wasn't treated the way he felt he should be treated, he's going to verbally put her down in front of the children, if they have children, or physically abuse her. He feels he has that right because that's his wife or that's his live-in girlfriend, and she has to do what he says because he's the man of the house. And that goes back to the way that man was raised.
Before you realize what's going on, you're in a relationship, and now it's all about survival. And it's amazing how typically subtle it really is when it starts. But in looking back at all of my experiences, I have zero regrets. I would not change it, but I sure as heck would not go back and do it the same way ever again. But I know I'm in a better place in my life. I'm very self-aware, and I'm very happy with who I am. And those experiences, as horrible as they may have been, helped shape me and have made me the advocate that I am, because now I'm very much a fighter, and I'm using my experiences to speak out against the violence. And I know I'm making a difference, not just in Omaha, but in the world. I'm making a better place.
Yeah, I would absolutely say that that happens. I think I've heard a lot of stories and research about this and reading about other women's stories is that they don't realize that they've been raped until after they've gotten information about what rape really is. And women, when they start to realize that rape isn't just you've been taken from this guy in a bushes and he violently rapes you and he leaves you for dead, they realize that rape is just non-consensual activities between you and a partner. And I feel like plenty of women have probably been pressured by their partners to do things that they're not willing to consent to, and in a situation where it seems so non-violent that it seems okay. I think that men, but also people of all genders, can be so manipulative in these situations that you really don't realize that you're being raped or that you're being assaulted in the way that they're pressuring you, and in ways with words and not necessarily violence or abuse or things that people can immediately think of when they think of rape and sexual assault.
I see that a lot, actually. I've been talking to somebody, mentoring somebody that is in her 30s now that happened to when she was 17 and 18. Was always told it wasn't rape when it is. And those can be some of the most damaging, is the coercion, what we call coercion rapes, where you would if you loved me, or, you know, Jennifer, who I speak with, in her relationship, her husband would tell her, you know, it's makeup sex, this is what you do. If you don't do it, I'll get it from somewhere else. And just because there's no force in the sense that someone's holding you down, or what you look at in what most people think of rape as being, which is, you know, you're getting beat up, you're going to have injuries, and actually most of the time there aren't. It's just as bad. It's still rape. It's still sexual assault if the person does not want to, and they communicate that. Consent is a one-time issue, one time and one time only. It doesn't matter if you're married. It doesn't matter if it's somebody you've been with before. Anytime that person doesn't want to have sexual relations and the other person either forces them or coerces them to do it, it's rape. But a lot of people don't understand that. Or what I see a lot is the victims who are under the influence of something, that they'll say, well, I was kissing that person before, I was doing this before. Well, were you intoxicated? Yes. Well, you can't consent when you're under the influence of drugs or alcohol. So it is rape, but they don't think of that. Or they just don't want to accept that, or they want to put the blame on themselves because it's, I should have known better. Well, I was the one that chose to drink, when it was actually the rapist who took it upon themselves to rape. So that is one of the biggest things that I see, especially in not necessarily younger generation, but a lot of the college campus sexual assaults. That's what we see for sure.
First thing is, we gotta speak out. And I don't care where someone is in their healing and recovery process. You can be fresh out of that relationship. It can be 5, 10, 20 years out of it. We have got to use our voices and speak out. We have to unify our voices. There's so many more of us than there are the perpetrators of the violence. And if we stand together and say, no more, we're not going to take this anymore. Women and children have rights. We don't deserve this. And even for the men who are victimized, nobody deserves to be treated like this.
Age to get it out in the open and let other women, young women your age, know that there's a lot of help available, and we know it's difficult to leave a dating relationship that's abusive, but that it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse unless you leave the relationship and talk to somebody about it. We in the Douglas County Attorney's Office, the Women's Center for Advancement, do have people that will walk you through the process of getting out. And it's important to know that there are a lot of women, young women, that are in abusive relationships that don't talk about it, but once they realize how prevalent it is and how many women have broken that relationship off, it's easier for that young woman to do so as well. I think by showing the woman that she does have the power to get out of that abusive relationship, that she has a right to get out of it, doesn't deserve to be treated in that manner. And when there are children involved and the children see that the mother has left the relationship because it was abusive, you're teaching those children how to want to be in a normal relationship and treat each other with love instead of abuse and verbal put downs. Because children are going to mimic, and their brains are like sponges. From the ages of 1 to 5, 90% of brain development occurs. And if it's not turned around at an early age, unfortunately it won't be able to be turned around.
I think that one of the most powerful things I've seen from aftermaths of rape and domestic violence and sexual assault is women kind of finding support within each other and supporting each other within it. Like, I think that what we've realized is that, or we, or like other women that have been assaulted in this way, is that they can realize that they don't need this male savior archetype. They don't need this savior to be able to ever feel whole again. Like, they can build themselves back up with other women. And I think it's about being unapologetic about what's happening to you and being honest about it, and being in a way of like, I don't care if people don't believe what I'm saying, or they think that I'm selfish, they think it's my fault, they think it's something that I could have prevented, because this is what happened to me. And
after a period of time, and the guy gets convicted, he gets put away, and they come in the next time, it's like a new woman. It's like, and we've had them say, recently one said, I feel like I've gained my freedom back, and never knew what it was like for several years.
I think what you said is the best thing, is just get people talking about it to destroy the myths that are out there. There's so many myths and misconceptions about sexual assault and domestic violence. And the biggest is what we've already talked about, which is that victim blaming. It's time to get people talking about the perpetrators and what the perpetrator does, and start focusing on their actions and that person's behavior. When I was growing up, we didn't talk about domestic violence, we didn't talk about sexual assault. That happened to somebody else over there. It was like, you know, you hide it under the rug. This doesn't happen in our community. And then after it happened to me, I realized how much I really was affected by those things, and that I believed the myth that only bad girls get sexually assaulted, or girls who sleep around, and because I was this good Catholic girl, this was not going to happen to me. And I think those are dangerous thoughts, and it starts with education at home, it starts with education at schools, and with talking about it, because the more we get people to understand the dynamics of these crimes, that it's not the victim's fault, more and more victims are going to feel comfortable coming forward. And then perpetrators are going to start realizing that they're going to be held accountable. There's just not enough of that right now. And I can't foresee any way to ever stop these types of crimes until people understand what they are about and actually truly start looking in the right direction to hold the individuals perpetrating accountable.